Hi there, in this video we're going to be talking about the mere exposure effect, which is a psychological phenomenon that helps to explain why we tend to like things that are familiar to us. The mere exposure effect was first discovered by psychologists back in the 1960s, and it's been studied extensively ever since. By the end of this video, you'll have a good understanding of what the mere exposure effect is, and how it can influence our preferences and behaviors. So, what exactly is the mere exposure effect? Well, simply put, it's the tendency for people to develop a preference for things that they're repeatedly exposed to. This could be anything from a piece of music, to a particular food, to a brand of clothing. The more we're exposed to something, the more familiar it becomes to us, and the more we tend to like it. Now, you might be wondering why this happens. Well, one theory is that repeated exposure to something makes it easier for our brains to process and understand. When something is familiar to us, our brains don't have to work as hard to process it, which can lead to a sense of comfort or even pleasure. Additionally, repeated exposure can create a sense of safety or security, as we feel like we know what to expect from something that we're familiar with. So, how can we use the mere exposure effect to our advantage? Well, one way is to use it in marketing or advertising. Companies often use repeated exposure to their brand or products to increase familiarity and positive associations with their brand. For example, you might see the same commercial for a product over and over again, or a logo repeatedly displayed in different locations. This can help to create a sense of familiarity and positive associations with the brand, which can increase the likelihood of someone purchasing their products. However, it's important to note that the mere exposure effect doesn't always lead to positive associations. In some cases, repeated exposure to something that we don't like can actually make us dislike it even more. This is known as the reverse mere exposure effect, and it can happen when we're exposed to something that we find unpleasant or aversive. So, that's the mere exposure effect in a nutshell. By understanding this phenomenon, we can better understand why we tend to like things that are familiar to us, and how companies and marketers can use this to their advantage. However, it's also important to be aware of the potential downsides of repeated exposure, and to recognize when the reverse mere exposure effect might be at play. Thanks for watching.